everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope you've enjoyed your lunch. Now, for the next 30 minutes, I will be talking about AI, artificial intelligence. And it's not just the science, it can feel like science fiction sometimes. And we're not just going to talk about the breathless Silicon Valley hype version, but the real, messy, consequential that is reshaping industries and how we make decisions today. That is the most important thing. What is AI actually bringing to us? Now, the title of this talk is deliberately a bit provocative, the AI of it all, because AI is not just a technology story. It's about who benefits, who decides, and who can we trust? Let's start with a question that sounds very simple but rarely gets asked seriously. Who benefits the most from innovation? Think about it a little bit. And of course, I have to get you in the right frame of mind, put up two against each other. So you have the people, and then you have the tech oligarchs, or the tech bros. Now, the numbers tell a striking story. Here are the numbers about who benefits the most. Which side gets 98%, and which side gets 2%? Make up your mind. Now, we actually have an answer to this. So, only around 2% of the benefits go to the innovator or the company behind the innovation, while the remaining 98% is captured by society. We tend to forget that. We tend to forget that when we see all these tech oligarchs residing right behind President Trump. Now, this is from the Nobel Prize-winning economist William Norhaus and his research done on this. So let's remember that. This is something that we need, and it benefits the majority of us. Now, before we talk about AI as an innovation, we need to know exactly what AI is. There are clear definitions, we just don't use them all the time. Have a look at this. Now, you have the more technical one, and then you have a more simplified version of this from John McCarthy, one of the stem fathers of AI, you could say. Now, in the more technical version of the definition, you see there are three components that are really important to understand. These are the three ingredients that you need in order to make AI. You need computational power. That's a given. Very often companies like NVIDIA has almost a monopoly on this. So on the individual level, it's very hard to have computational power. But that's one of the key ingredients. Then you have data, both on an individual level, but also in an organization. We generate a lot of data, so that's something that we all have great amounts of. Then there's the goal. You need to define what is the goal, what is the purpose of AI. And the ones that can define that are the domain experts, those with domain knowledge within a certain field. So these three ingredients are needed in order to make AI. And that's the most important part of the definition, to understand this. Now, if we look more into data, why is that important? Well, the world's most valuable resource was no longer oil back in 2017. This is a front page from The Economist. But we are now saying that that is data. We now have consensus on that. Back in 2017, this was controversial to say. And we still make a lot of money from oil and gas. But we say that data is the most valuable resource. And I would argue that it's actually a special kind of data that is even more important, because this kind of data is coming from social media platforms. So back in 2017, we were speaking of social media platforms such as Facebook, Google, so on and so on. They're actually a proxy, because what you really need to understand is how can we make the consumers chronically consumers and consummating. The answer to that is by having more granular data. And the granular data that I'm talking to you about is actually this, healthcare data. If you would really like to know how people are doing and how you can convert them into consumers, it's knowing about their healthcare data. And nowadays, we give that freely away in order to gain insight into our own lives. So if you want to know how well you're running, you have a Garmin. But the company behind Garmin is also, they also know a lot about you. They know, for instance, when you're not exercising. Is that information that they can use? Of course. Apple, Fitbit, they all have products in this line. Now, there is a specific company that uses healthcare data without us really thinking about it as healthcare data, and that's this company. They have said sleep is their greatest enemy because when you sleep, you don't watch Netflix. So the granular data that healthcare data really is actually representing the most important data about us. This is sensitive data. We just don't think about it that way. Now, we need to understand AI in a broader perspective. So I brought you this. So when we talk about AI, most people only talk about large language models, such as ChatGPT from OpenAI. That's just a very small part of it. So when an engineer, especially, or a technical person asks you, what kind of AI are you using? What they're interested in is the subsets. Is it machine learning? Is it deep learning? Is it generative AI, which is the latest? Not just answering ChatGPT, that's not enough. So they're looking for understanding of what kind of AI are you actually using. Now, think of AI as a set of nested layers, so each built on the previous one. And at the outer ring, we have AI as the broad field. This is back from the 1950s. Inside that is machine learning, which emerged during the 1980s, systems that learn from data rather than following explicit rules. And then you have deep learning from around 2010, algorithms inspired by the structure of human brain using neural networks with many layers. So they're actually pretty much inspired by the human brain. At the center, the most recent layer, you have generative AI, systems that just don't classify or predict, but they create, so they generate based off of internet. Now, you know all of this, but what is really important to understand is how especially generative AI works. A lot of people tend to misunderstand and talk about AI as if it was one thing. Now, the most commercially significant class of generative AI right now is large language models. So let's understand how they work. So how many of you remembers how to do conditional probability from school? I hear you laugh, so I am assuming not a lot. So this is actually how large language models work. An LLM is a model that estimates the probability of a sequence of words, tokens, and uses these probabilities to predict and generate the next token in a text. That means that you might guess the wrong word, or you can get the wrong word. So you can have so-called hallucinations. This is a big part of why each prompt can generate a significant differently, like a unique reply, but also the reason why the replies can be very plausible, but factually wrong, because it is just probabilities. And this is what seems to be the most misunderstood part among common people, how large language models work. Now, large language models for text generating is one thing, but they're also doing something else. They're used as a fundamental layer in the agentic AI era, which is what we will talk about now. So the evolution of AI towards agency has gone from rule-based automation to machine learning to generative AI to now agentic AI. So it started as logic, static logic, and then pattern detection, content generation, and now we've moved on to goal-driven action. This is where we are at right now. So what we're doing is actually looking at this evolution that mirrors the increasing capabilities and also intelligence and independence of these systems. So we can now act and plan to fulfill a certain goal. Now, what will we do? What will come out of all this agentic AI? So for a lot of organizations, this is really important. These are numbers from Gartner and their predictions for agentic AI by 2028. So work decisions, 15% of daily work decisions made by autonomously by AI agents. Then you have enterprise applications, 33%. So these are numbers, some of the key numbers and also key advice. So what we're advising is actually to integrate AI agents across the functions. And then you can build a really unique infrastructure. But even though you see all these gains and the numbers seem to be significant, we still need to remember that the underlying factor of it all, that you use LLMs for this, means that you can have hallucinations. Now, hallucinations, let's go back to that. Some organizations have experienced this as a big problem. Now, we do have reports, 2 examples from Deloitte, allegedly cited AI-generated research in a $1 million report from Canadian provincial government. They had, in one of the instances, they needed to reimburse the government because of this. Now, this is what the scandals that you really do not want for your organization. In another instance, you have a healthcare service in the UK that used an AI tool for transcription, and then it led to a patient actually receiving the wrong diagnosis. In this case, it was an amputation, so okay, he's fine. You could argue that. It was diabetes, but it's still, they gave him a diagnosis that he didn't have. So unnecessary testing, unnecessary worrying, and also that could have led somewhere else. And just screening is actually, it's bringing harm to the patient. It could have led to something else. So I'm sure if you just switch the diagnosis, you can see how harmful that can be. So these are all things that we want to avoid. But still, all of us are hearing all this hype about AI. We all need to address this. We all need to get on the train and really start learning and deploying AI. These are some of the men that are hyping this up and also letting go of people because of AI. So Meta just recently cut 10% of their work staff. And they're spending billions on AI and data centers, right? They're saving some on what they previously spent on employees and spending it on data centers. Now, in Norway, the wealth fund chief tells everyone that using AI is a must. You will not be hired at the wealth fund if you do not know how to deploy AI. Whether himself is well-versed in AI, he's actually saying that he's not that well-versed, but this is what he is implying. If you cannot use LLMs or any AI for that matter, you do not have a place at the Norwegian Wealth Fund. Now, this is the European story. These are some reports from China. So Chinese court just ruled that firms cannot lay off workers on AI grounds. There has even been compensation given to the sacked workers replaced by AI. So they're going about it a little bit differently. These are some of the differences in how we're regulating this. Now, you would think that this implies that we're having great gains from using AI and being deployed in organizations. But actually, there are research showing, despite billions invested in generative AI, this report from MIT Nanda came out last year, shows that 95% of organizations are not seeing any return on investment. And still, when they're spending more and more. And so what they're actually saying in their conclusion is that adoption is widespread, but the gains are very limited. So what you're seeing is that individual productivity may improve. It's not necessarily translating into meaningful impact for the organization and the bottom line. You could also ask, are the employees going home earlier? Do they actually complete more tasks? Or do you complete the task better as an employee? This is actually very familiar to something we've been through before. Have a look at this. Now, this is called the Solow paradox from 1987. It was defined by Robert Solow, another economist. So what he said back in the 80s was that you can see the computer age everywhere, but not in the productivity statistics. You can't see them in the productivity statistics. But we all know the answer. We saw it later. It just took more years to see that. So does it sound familiar? Is that what is going to happen with AI? That is probably what these CEOs of these tech companies are all thinking. So let's compare. So you have the Solow paradox and now the AI productivity paradox. So between 87 and 2026, we are seeing the same things. Back in the 80s, computers were everywhere, but productivity growth slowed. And then now in the 2020s, AI is everywhere, and then you can see from different reports. Some say 80%, others say 95% of the firms see no measurable impact. Now, this is important because it means that it's underway, but we can't see it yet. That's one take. But what is definitely happening, and that we don't see or can read from media because it's not really covered, is that AI is actually in the golden age. Now, back in 2024, these researchers, all computer scientists, they won Nobel Prizes in their respective fields. Now, they won in physics and chemistry. So computer science is not a field on its own that receives recognition from the Nobel Committee, but these were all AI researchers. And bear in mind, almost all of them are also affiliated with a tech company, not universities. This is also a new trend. Now, why did Hinton and Hopfield win? They laid the foundation for the neural networks. So they were inspired by the human brain. They knew that, for instance, when there's learning between two nodes, there will be a stronger commitment. When there's weakening, there will be no learning. This is the same between neurons, but also nodes. Now, if you look into why Hassabis, a British scientist, won, you can see that what they created is the solution to what is called the holy grail of biology. We thought it would take us 50 to hundreds of years to solve this. Being able to understand how proteins look like, what they look like in a 3D form. So what are they doing when they start to fold? That is actually the question you need to answer if you're going to understand what the role of the protein is. Understanding that means that you understand what is it in our body that it does, what does it solve. Now, they created an algorithm called AlphaFold. Predicts the 3D structure of more than 200 million proteins with a high accuracy. And it results in faster and cheaper drug development in the future. Now, this is very, very important. In order for us to get the cancer vaccines in the future, you need this. And we have gotten this as well. Now, researchers, they all use AlphaFold to design new cancer drugs, or at least candidates, in just 1 month. This is a shortening of the phase from 3 to 5 years to only 1 month. That is crucial and also a very significant leap. What we are also seeing is that these algorithms are making sure that it democratizes the access to knowledge. Have a look at this. So there is this person in Australia he has a dog who was diagnosed with cancer, and he started thinking, is there anything I can do? So he used OpenAI's ChatGPT to understand how do you read the genome, the DNA, to understand where are the mutations going wrong, where are the mutations happening in his dog's DNA. So he used ChatGPT to understand that, and also he got help. So he got help from AlphaFold to actually predict what kind of vaccine should be made, a personalized vaccine for his dog. Then he had the help from a lab actually in Australia to help him make this. And they were surprised from how far he had come. So he knew the ingredients he needed, he knew the exact genome, and he also knew what needed to be done with the algorithm AlphaFold. Now, this isn't to say that, now we've found a solution to all cancers for all dogs, because this was personalized. It can only help his dog. And what it showed was that the cancer cells did actually shrink. Whether it was curative in the long perspective, that's another thing. But the story tells a very important lesson. We all need to use these algorithms maybe to gain new insights and do something that we weren't able to do before. Now, for the healthcare industry and the drug-making industry, this is revolutionizing the pipelines. Now, instead of having preclinical phase and stuck there for 3 to 5 years, you can now shorten it to 12 to 18 months. And also, the clinical trial success rates are very low, or they have been. So now with AI, we're actually reaching 80 to 90% versus 40 to 65 before. And the overall success rates are also going up with the use of AI. Bear in mind, the media doesn't necessarily cover this as well. They talk about the big companies and the generative AI, the LLMs. Have a look at this. Now, on your left is from Business Insider. So in February, 5th or 6th of February this year, Anthropic and OpenAI, they released dueling AI models, LLMs. That was all the hype. So they had these updated versions of their previous models. And also there was some controversy on Anthropic and their deal with the War Department in the US. So that got all the attention. However, there was something very, very important that happened 5 days later, which got no media coverage. And that is the fact that a similar company as the one that created AlphaFold, that is Google DeepMind, Google DeepMind has another company, Isomorphic Labs, and they presented an AI drug design engine that goes beyond AlphaFold. So the Nobel Prize winning algorithm AlphaFold has now been bypassed by the one from Isomorphic Labs because it's more than 50% as effective. That is the thing that should have been on the front pages. It's very hard to explain, but still, it means that we will get cheaper drugs, we will have easier development of cancer vaccines, and still, it's not even mentioned. So I had to go to a niche journal, Biopharma Trend, which I don't really read every day, to get to this. And I'm sure you don't read either. You see my point? There is a lack of understanding what is important, what important things are happening in AI development that we are missing out on. Now, I probably wowed you with this, but I will wow you some more. Have a look at this. So how many of you would like to be operated on or anything by Dr. Terminator? Because this is what's actually happening. Autonomous AI surgery is coming. On your left, you're seeing some pictures from videos captured during so-called Da Vinci surgeries. These are surgeries done by robot hands, but they're monitored completely by a human being, a doctor, who may be sitting in a different country, in another room, but they're monitored. So each movement is actually from a human being. Now, what we have done is we've taken these videos, thousands of videos, and we have put them in an AI model. And the AI model has done what is called imitation learning. So it learns from videos. When we do doom scrolling, we learn nothing. TikToks, we don't learn anything. I'm 100% sure. But these machines or these models, they're learning how to operate on people, or actually on pigs. So on your right, you can see that robot surgery on humans could be trialed in the NHS within a decade. They're going to try it on humans as well, because what they're seeing is that these completely autonomous AI surgery robots are actually able to receive 100% success rate. They've learned from humans doing surgeries, okay? And the only thing, the caveat to this, is that they have been doing procedures on dead pigs, so we wouldn't know if the pigs felt pain or if they could have bled out. So that's important stuff, of course. But they are going to try it on humans as well. And why do we need this? Because, okay, the concentration of surgeons is not the same everywhere in the world. So we have a lack of surgeons. This could be a solution. And also, the thing is, they actually show that, okay, they could be, in terms of how fast they're doing the procedures, a bit slower. But on the other end, the precision is better. So you're gaining something, maybe losing out on how much time it takes. Now, in order for this to happen and be something that you will see worldwide and also implemented in different sectors in different ways, you would need a different approach from AI. So these are two, you could call them the godfather and godmother of AI, Fei-Fei Li and Yann LeCun. Now, what they're saying is that in order for this to really blossom, you would need real-world data. So spatial intelligence is the next frontier. So you need more information about how the world really works. And that means not just having to prompt what you believe is to be true, but actually putting in videos so that the models themselves can understand the world that we are living in. And this is what they're building, and both of them have their own startups that are going really well. So they're collecting and also receiving a lot of funding for this. The only thing is that none of them are actually based in Europe, unfortunately, which is a point we will make now. Remember I talked about Dr. Hassabis, Demis Hassabis. Now, Demis Hassabis received the Nobel Prize for AlphaFold in 2024. 10 years earlier, he tried to get the funding in Europe. They wouldn't give him enough financial security to do that. So he went to the US. He met with Elon Musk, Peter Thiel. They believed strongly in his vision of AlphaFold. Now, what is it that I'm going at and talking about here? It's the fact that in order for us to have real European competitiveness, we really need to fund these brilliant minds. Otherwise, our Nobel Prizes that actually belong here in Europe, they will go to an American tech company, which has been the case. So back in 2024, this was an achievement by Google, DeepMind, who bought DeepMind, the British-founded company that later became American. So we lost out on this opportunity. We could have had one of the strongest tech companies in the world if we had funded it correctly from the very beginning. And this is something that Dr. Draghi also points out. He's an economist with a PhD in this. Now, Mario Draghi, he delivered the diagnosis in 2024. Europe had a productivity problem. And what he's saying is that Europe largely missed out on the digital revolution led by the internet during the 90s and the productivity gains it brought later on. So in fact, the productivity gap between EU and the US is largely explained by the tech sector, which is a fact that we don't give as much attention. This is really important going forward. And also the fact that we don't have any leading European companies on this. This is the reason. It goes back to the 90s. Now, how are we going to deploy AI? Is it going to affect our future? And it is. Have a look at this. This is the skill trajectories of AI adoption. Now, there are several ways this can go. So you have a look at what is called the AI-enhanced upskilling. What we wish for the future to bring is that for those of us in the workforce that started our careers before AI was actually deployed, using AI can have an upskilling effect, right? But also, it could give us a de-skilling effect. If you offload too much, you can have the de-skilling effect. And then you have our future colleagues that come in and receive their skills and build their skills after the fact that AI has become a natural thing in the workforce. They can experience never skilling, never reaching the level of expert level that we all have in this room. Now they can experience never skilling. They can also experience misskilling, using AI in such a way, let's say it hallucinates, that they misinterpret, misunderstand, and then they have the misskilling. Now, to sum it all up, key takeaways on individual level and for organizations. Now, for individuals, it's very important to stay curious and not anxious. Even though I gave you some pretty good examples of how it can go bad, it's still important that we all know how to use and deploy these AI tools. Especially women. The women amongst us here, very often when there's new technology being deployed and implemented, we are very often 20% behind the guys. And what we give as a reason for that is that, oh, we haven't received any coursing. Nobody taught us this. The guys never say that. Each time there is a new technology, we are behind 20%. We lag behind. There is no need for that gap. So number 2, protect your core skills. 3, use AI as a tool, not an oracle. It's a given. And then number 4, notice what optimizes for you. That is very important. On the organizational level, you have to change how you work and not just the tools you use. It's not important what tools you use. It's how do you do your work? How do you go about it? Then you have to measure impact, not adoption. Critical point. Then you need to build in human oversight by design. So you need to look at it as if, okay, there's a co-pilot, not autopilot. And then invest in your people, not just your systems. Thank you for listening.